efficiency. Oh my, there we go. All right.
Let there be light.
Um, Two main areas of focus: irrigation, landscape efficiency, and shower efficiency. Um, so for residents who have an irrigation system, we will be offering irrigation assessments and consultations to make sure that they are watering their landscape efficiently and not overwatering. We're also going to be talking about low water plants and doing the low water landscape rebate conversion, as well as even just simple technology of a $30, piece that will shut off your irrigation system when it's raining. In addition, if somebody does not have an irrigation system, we're going to be offering moisture meters. Stick it in the ground. It's going to tell you for your plants when you've watered enough. And for people who have a lot of trees, we have this little device here that we'll be handing out. Once somebody reaches 5 gallons, they shut off and stop watering their trees. So for people who do not have a yard or do not water their yard, we also are focusing on shower efficiency for people who live in apartments and whatnot. The average person uses 25 gallons of water per shower. This free, high-performing WaterSense efficient shower head, 30-second swap, you can get that shower down to 15 gallons per minute. If you take a 5-minute shower, and these we're handing out for free, you can get it down to 7.5 gallons per shower. And if you use a shower shutoff valve that you're only using water to first get wet and rinse off, you can get it down to 1.5 gallons per shower, saving not only a tremendous amount of water, but also energy of heating up that water. During the month of April, we will be engaging in a lot of outreach activities, 21 events in 30 days, so that's quite a bit, where we'll be talking about these areas of focus and other conservation tips and invitation to our various rebate programs. Some of the highlights of our outreach is on April 1st, we'll be doing the downtown scavenger hunt. This is a collaborative event with other departments in the city, as well as local nonprofits and even area local businesses. We'll be doing a conservation-themed scavenger hunt starting at the visitor center, where people will be engaging in conservation themes to earn their stamp to go through the scavenger hunt with prizes at the end. On April 7th, we're doing First Friday in Heritage Square, which was a huge event last year. We had a lot of outreach and engagement during that event. We're also going to be showcasing the 4th grade water ethics contest during that event. On April 8th, we are partnering with Water Distribution, doing a tour of the Lake Mary Water Treatment Plant at 10 a.m. On April 19th, I'm going to be doing a Water Energy Nexus talk at Brightside Bookshop. This is a part of a Climate Solutions series, so we'll be talking a lot about the connections between water and energy use at that event. On April 22nd, we're going to be doing Flagstaff Earth Day Festival, which of course has a huge engagement there. We'll also be doing a rainwater harvesting workshop at that event along with tabling. And on April 29th, we're doing the Full Steam Ahead event at Fort Tuthill, where we saw a huge number of engagement with families during that time. There are flyers here for you that have got the main events, but if any of you would like to see the full 21 events that we're doing throughout this month, please let us know. We are engaging with all ages and all activities and interests. So really excited about this, and we hope to see you around and that we get your support. Thanks so much.
Any questions? Go ahead, Don.
Are you involved in Project WET during this time period? I realize it's primarily a school program, but it typically happens in in April.
We are tabling alongside of them for a couple of the events, particularly ones that are more children focused, such as Full Steam Ahead. But we are also doing our own separate programs as well, engaging K through 12. One is a youth climate summit that's happening on April 4th, that we're not doing in connection with Project WET.
John, you have a question? Yeah, I think.
Do you have any, do you have an estimation of what kind of impact this might have from past years? Like on the, that hump we have in the summer where from landscape irrigation?
Yeah. Well, as far as the title of Water Awareness Month, we certainly are successful in increasing awareness during the month. As far as, and one of the reasons why we chose to focus on landscape and irrigation efficiency is to really hone in on dealing with that period of time where we don't get much rain and people might want to turn on their irrigation systems or begin, watering and, dare I say, maybe overwatering to make sure that their plants survive, during this dry season. And usually people, go overboard in the trying to protect, their plants. So
I can vouch for the soil moisture thing. I got one last year and
Yeah.
it's very useful. Things you think are dry are not necessarily dry. So that's very useful.
yeah. Thanks. Any other questions?
I just a couple. So first off, I think the number of events that you all do with the budget and staffing is pretty incredible. So thank you for the effort to get out there and really push that because it's not easy.
Thank you.
And the second point would be interesting to hear, like maybe in June, just a quick, we gave away X number of shower heads and this and that, just to get sort of a count, right? To see how effective that is. And then
Absolutely.
at some point, I think we want to sit down with you and the chair, or not chair, excuse me, department head Shannon, on is there a way to potentially do a efficiency audit when properties are in escrow? Like, are all the shower heads actually swapped out? Are all the toilets the most efficient? Is the maybe landscaping might be a reach too far, but is that efficient as part of the sales process? I don't know, because that's, like a lot of value changing hand right there, and swapping out 2 toilets in that regime probably isn't horrible. So it might be a way to wedge some more efficiency into the city, but I don't know if we can even do that. So maybe it's something to sit down and think about together as a little quick huddle up. But
Yeah, absolutely. I will say from Water Awareness Month last year, we did a big push for residential consultations. And for the renters in that group, I said, please leave your stuff there if you move, your
Right.
efficient shower head. And actually tomorrow, we have another consultation with somebody from last year who has since moved and is like, let's do it again. And I'm like, great.
Yeah.
So, of course, it's anecdotal, but yeah, we are getting the word out there and trying to keep the efficiency in the homes where we can.
Yep, excellent.
Yeah.
One quick one. Is one of your projects relating to landscaping mulching and the effect it can have on saving water?
Yes, that's definitely something that we discuss at length in the rainwater harvesting workshops, but that's also something that we discuss during the low water landscape rebate conversion, the initial process. Yeah. Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you, Emily, so much. So we have item 4B, which was an update from Ed on routine flood mitigation. But I think we want to postpone that until next month, perhaps?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Staff would like to request to postpone that till next month. So staff is not available to present on this tonight, but if there are specific questions leading up to that update, I'm happy to either try to answer those or relay those and get a response back.
Okay. Anybody have any specific questions besides, are we ready for the snow to melt? Which is happening as we speak. Yeah, but have you seen any issues? I guess one question would just be, as we're starting to get into the melt, do we forecast or see any issues arising, or does everything seem to be somewhat, quote unquote, stable?
That's okay. So, Gary Miller in engineering. So over the last week or two, when we've started to see some of this additional flow in our washes, I asked the same question of Ed, and he said, we haven't had any issues. Our stormwater inspector has been out on a regular basis looking at different areas of town, and we haven't received any significant complaints at this time or seen flooding in any areas.
I just pose this as an interest. I always monitor Schultz Creek at 180. I just drove up there before the meeting, and Schultz Creek is running. It's dark. It's not huge yet. And the Rio is pretty big.
Yeah.
So, but I was just wondering what the status was on the 180 culvert Schultz Creek intersection there.
That's something I'll probably have to get back to you on. I don't have the most up-to-date information, so I can certainly touch base with Ed and we can get a response back to everyone.
Great. Go ahead, Don.
I might also comment that the Rio de Flag at Fox Glen, the park is about 20% underwater right now. And over at Continental Country Club, Lake Continental is reforming. I don't know if it's reached the level to where it would flow into the bottomless pits, but it's certainly very close.
Okay. I don't, you know more than me. I haven't driven and looked at those areas myself.
Yeah, there's a lot of water standing around, but this is good. Let it soak in. Yeah.
This is Ben. I live there, and there's not much getting to the bottomless pit yet. The Rio at this end of town is flowing, but not much. Just soaking in.
That's good. Good. Thanks, Ben. Okay, so we'll move on to item 4C, which is an update on our funded and unfunded capital projects from Mr. Gary Miller with a few highlights.
Few highlights, just a few. Well, I was going to try and pull both of these up on one screen to do a comparison, but this is not the software I am used to using, so I'll do my best. I have the capital plan. I sent both the capital plan that was presented in January as well as this updated one with the highlighted changes for your reference, so feel free to use that as a reference. I apologize, I can't show both of those on one screen. I can dance back and forth as we go through it. But before I start talking about specific projects, I wanted to give you an overview of the process that we've gone through to get to where we're at today. So the capital plan that was presented in January was really a collaboration with staff to identify here are the projects that we feel are needed moving forward and prioritization of those projects. That was prior to understanding what our revenue projections were. And so I hesitate to call it a wish list, but it was more of this is what we feel is needed to move forward. So after we identified what those revenue projections were and what our budget was available to us, we started to make some cuts from the capital plan. So that was one step. And then more recently, we met with the budget team as they had concerns about our expenditure limitations as a city as a whole. And so the city has a certain limit that they can expend every year, and we're really trying to refine what our actual expenses were going to be for next year. And the current capital plans and budgets were over that expenditure limitation, and so we were trying to get that refined so that we didn't exceed that for next fiscal year. So that was another area where we started to make some changes to the capital plan in order to not exceed those expenditure limitations. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on each individual project that I highlighted. I want this to be more of a discussion. If you have specific questions about a particular project, please let me know. I'm going to just touch on a few that I thought were important that I wanted to highlight for the commission. The first one being the aging water infrastructure replacement. This is a category where we've had a couple $1 million to $2.5 million each year to replace aging infrastructure. That line item across the board throughout years was reduced by more than 50% due to those budgetary constraints. and some additional costs in the capital budget. The next one I wanted to highlight was the new well and pump house. JWP, the John Wesley Powell water line oversized, that was moved up as a result of work that Capital's working on. They expect that to move forward, so that got moved up. The new well and pump house, that was scheduled to be budgeted roughly $2 million every year. This budget cycle, we increased the cost due to inflation, and we also couldn't afford the costs every year, so that got spread to every other year. And the plan previously was drill a well, and then build a well house on off years. So drill a well, build a well house in 2 years, drill a well, build a well and house in the next 2 years. So now that's gotten spread out every other year, that funding. The next one, Schweitzer Canyon Transmission Line Phase 5. This got pushed back as a result of that expenditure limitation. I will also note that Schweitzer Canyon Phase 4, the bids for that closed last week, and that came in roughly $1 million over budget, so there will be some changes to that as well. The Lake Mary raw water pipeline, I told you I wasn't going to go through all of them. It seems like I am. The Lake Mary raw water pipeline rehab, just that out year in 28 got eliminated from the budget, again, due to those revenue projections and not having the budget for it. Moving down the line, Fort Tut Hill well, that got pushed back as a result of the expenditure limitation. Interbasin water line road, that just changed to reflect the actual costs that we're expecting, plus all of the grant money that we received for that project. And then interbasin line, those funds got removed due to not being able to afford it, basically. So I want to stop there for water and see if there's any questions or any other projects that I didn't touch on.
Oh, you hold it. The first one, when you do, you say drill the well and then do the pump house next year?
Yeah.
So that well just is drilled but not functioning, right?
Correct.
Till you get the pump equipment in.
That's right.
So it takes 2 years.
That's how it was originally planned, yes. And now with this plan, it's going to take, you're going to drill the well in 1 year, it's going to sit for a year, and then you're going to build the well house 2 years from there.
Okay. The other one was, when you're doing these pipelines, is that a function of the city or is it outside contractor?
The city doesn't build the lines themselves.
They don't have the capability of doing,
Correct. So that's not done by staff. We contract that work out.
that's done by bidding process?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Doug.
Back to the new wells and pump houses. What's the buffer in terms of water use in the city's portfolio? So if you drill a well, you have to wait now, 2 more years before you can actually, probably 3 years realistically, before you can bring that well into production. Is there enough buffer within the water use numbers within the city to account for that?
Yeah, I don't, there's numbers in my head going around and I hesitate to offer them up because they're probably wrong, but yes, there is enough buffer for the time being. And actually there's a well that we currently have, and that was Fort Tut Hill well further down. That well in particular, that's already been drilled. The money for that line item is specifically for a well house. And so again, planning to have that scheduled online in 25. But yes, we do have enough buffer at the moment to support the spreading out of those wells.
So just a couple of things. As to the interbasin line, that's not the repair work that's happening, right? Or is that something different? Because right now we've got a lot of repair work to do, right?
Yeah, so there's two separate line items for interbasin waterline road. So, or sorry, one's labeled interbasin waterline road. That's all the repairs that are
Okay,
being
okay.
done right now.
Okay,
The other line item is just the water line, I'll say downstream from that work
Okay.
to the treatment plant
okay.
itself.
And then ultimately, if we need to make adjustments to the plan because of water supply issues, then we make adjustments to the plan. And we might need to go talk to our friends at the city council about shifting funds around within the general budget again, if we have real pressing water needs, right?
Yes, if we had
Yes, we
very
should-
pressing water needs.
We should never constrain ourselves on that, so,
We can always reprioritize.
yeah, okay.
I was gonna add a comment to that, but it's escaping me.
Wastewater. Oh, sorry.
We can't jump ahead. I was just wondering about that same issue about the water line. So we have 16 million budgeted to repair where the damage starts, or it starts pretty quick, but is there grant money that's being applied to that also?
Yes, so emergency management money, well, Stacy's here, she could speak to it in a lot of detail. But yes, we have it fully funded.
I'm here in the crowd. So hi, I'm Stacy, the Grants Contracts Emergency Management Director. Actually, just this week, I got notice that Department of Fire and Forestry Management will fund this project 100% at $16.1 million. They gave us a cap. And so, but what Gary's presenting is we budget all our grants so that we have the expenditure appropriations, and then we'll go back and get reimbursed at 100% from DFFM. So that's great news. And that just happened this week.
That's excellent news. Thank you for following up on that.
So we have 16 million to play with.
A question from Ben and for Stacy. Why are they being so helpful? That's very helpful.
I'm just gonna say.
Because they really broke it.
Stacy's really good at her job.
I mean, does Stacy have any, like, who should we be thanking? Does Stacy have any help, like friends in high places? Like what? Well,
Yeah,
maybe
actually,
a question for later.
It's interesting. I actually presented to Director Torres with DFFM. I presented our project and our need for the funding. It came out of House Bill 2001 that was set up for post-fire flooding, and had a really long conversation with the director. Must have did a good job selling the story and why we needed our water, but for life and safety. So it's pretty exciting that he was able to fund us. So that's great. So thanks.
So then my follow-up question on this is the budget for actually repairing the water line going to grow soon?
So the majority of the expenses for this project are for the road itself. We only had one segment of line that was actually damaged. As I understand it, I've been talking with the project manager some, but we're trying to prioritize that section of line so that we can get the water line itself back online while the road repairs are occurring.
So is there a target date for getting all this done?
Target date?
Yeah, hi again, Stacy Brecklin Eggs, Grants Contracts Emergency Manager Director. So we are going to council with our guaranteed maximum price number 2. That will be at the 60% design, so we're close. And then we'll be going to council with a construction one here soon. What we're trying to, there's approximately 3 locations broken up on the pipe. Yeah, no, you haven't been in all the meetings that I've been in, so it's okay. And so we're trying to see if we could tackle some of those down below as soon as the snow melts, get that line back in place so we can get the water flowing. Then we'll come back and do repairs on the road. And any mitigation. This fund also allows for not just repairs, but for adding new pipe in some of the lower sections in the Schultz Creek. This will allow us to take that concrete pipe out and replace it with maybe ductile iron or whatever. So, so this is really good news to water services and everybody into your commission. So thank you. So does that answer all the questions? Did I answer them right?
Yes.
Good.
If we issued awards, you would get the Hero of Flagstaff Award, so. That's right.
And a mask. All right, good to move on.
Tally ho.
Tally ho. All right, for wastewater, the first project highlighted here is the Rio to Flag Flood Control Project. This money changed as a result of that project moving forward in the next year. So that was a pretty significant change from the previous budget presentation. The Wildcat dewatering facility was defunded completely because we don't have the funding and it wasn't one of the top higher priorities. Same with the solar drying facility. The facility master plan, we reduced that some. Let's see, which other ones did I want to highlight? The Country Club Interceptor is a main sewer interceptor that we kept the design dollars for that so we could do some assessment and potentially design and have a better idea of what the need is. But the actual construction dollars themselves were removed due to lack of funding. And then I think that's it. Let's see. I'm going to move down to the next sheet, which is UV disinfection. Similar scenario to what I just described on the previous project. We kept the design dollars, but eliminated the construction dollars due to lack of funding. And I think those are the only projects I wanted to highlight.
So
For wastewater.
two questions on wastewater for me. Anybody else have any questions? So I look at the scope of the funding, and one line item that is not in there is wastewater capability expansion for the future, right? To start gearing up for that. How are we?
I forgot to mention that.
How are we communicating, tackling, getting ready for $280 million expenditure? Because if this is running out to 28, we're going to be pretty deep into it, I think, by that time frame, yeah?
Yeah, so basically you're looking at line item number 21. So we had set aside some funding for design specifically for expansion of our wastewater treatment facilities. We did prioritize the facility master plan update, which is where we're going to do a master plan to identify what our path forward is for expansion of our wastewater treatment facilities. So that's the first step we would go through regardless. The design dollars that we had set out in the future were fairly significant. Typically you see 10 to 15% of your construction costs set aside for design. So we're looking at $20 million, $25 million for design. The budget couldn't handle that right at the moment, but this master plan should inform, or that's the goal of this master plan, is to inform what our path forward looks like, what the recommendation is, and hopefully a better idea of what those costs look like so that we can better communicate the needs in the future.
Can you remind me of, I had a couple numbers in my head swimming around, but I think I've got them wrong, of when we thought we need this to come online to replace the current filtration system that had to come offline because it needs to be refreshed, right? I had 29 in my mind, but I think that's wrong.
Yeah, so it was about 10 years out when
Okay.
we needed additional capacity in Wildcat. That was based on one of the last assessments that we had done, which was the biosolids master plan. And with the biosolids master plan, there were recommendations that allowed us to get a little further into the future. And some of those are some of the projects we're working on right now, which is the Rio digesters as an example. It's from a pure capacity standpoint, it's my expectation that with those digesters coming online, from a capacity perspective, we should more than satisfy that need to get us 10 years into the future. And maybe even further than that, but it doesn't address the age of the treatment infrastructure that we currently have, and that's still a need. And again, that's part of what the facility master plan should identify and help us move forward with.
Thank you.
So a few questions. One, the drying, solids drying stuff,
The dewatering?
dewatering facility. So in lieu of that, are we going to continue using geotubes and so forth?
For the time being, yes. So the dewatering and solar drying facility were projects that we're potentially exploring with Noresco. But that is part of a different phase of Noresco's contract that we will pursue at some future date. It's not part of the phase one, which City Council is contracting on right now. So there's potential for funding through some other mechanism with Noresco. That's still in the works and undefined at this point in time.
Since we have a Forest Service person here, I'll just throw this out. There have been thoughts by the water group of using forest waste products, from thinning projects to do a cogeneration power plant and then possibly dispose of solids from Wildcat in the process. And have you heard anything about that or been involved in any discussions?
I haven't been part of any specific discussions. I'm aware of the technology associated with that to a very small extent. But in order for that to take place, we would need to implement these projects, the dewatering facility and solar drying facility. So if that's something that the city decides to prioritize in the future, these projects would have to precede that.
Last question.
That would be fantastic. Sorry, comment. Just +1 to that cogeneration. This is Ben.
Super. On the back page, after line item number 25, we dropped down to 10 through 14 there at the tail end of wastewater. Are those all bond-funded projects?
That's correct. Those were just categorized separately in actually a different spreadsheet, and I just consolidated them differently, and those are all the bond projects. Good.
Reclaimed.
Moving down to reclaim. I'm going to move down on my spreadsheet as well, so I see all of the existing and proposed. So the reclaim capital plan is actually, what is shown here is almost identical to the adopted budget from last year. So not what I presented in January, but the adopted budget from last year. And all of the highlighted removed budget items were a result of budget capacity, so just a lack of funding. So we maintained the priority of the bottleneck project, as you can see, and then some of the just maintaining the reclaim system, and all of those other projects were unable to be funded. Any questions on reclaim?
Well, I've got a question. Considering the news of the last 3 days with PFAS compounds and regulation imminent, we'll see. And we know that we have PFAS compounds in our reclaimed water. It seems to me maybe a tear short-sighted to stop looking at advanced treatment. And I'm hoping maybe some of that 16 million might be, like $1 million or so, might be able to be diverted back into that area.
So I can speak to the 16 million specifically. That was money that we never had budgeted in the first place. So we wouldn't have been able to make those repairs without that money. The PFAS regulations, and I might look to Shannon a little on that, that is specific to drinking water, not necessarily reclaimed water. And advanced treatment is still something that will be a component of this master plan that we look at for wastewater treatment. So it'll still be something that we look at and determine how we're going to prioritize in the future.
And I think, Gary, if I'm, and John, maybe part of that is wrapped up in the grant that Aaron was pursuing for the move, but also then are there grants and other funds that we can give to do the advanced water treatment sampling? So I think it was looking for funding outside of this budget, if I remember correctly.
I mean, here's the catch is, you know, when we reviewed those grants in the session we had a few weeks ago, almost all those grants required a match. And if you don't have any matching money, you're not going to get any money. There was one grant that didn't, but it was pretty small. It was like 500,000. So if we don't have any money to match, it's going to be difficult to get grants relating to these projects. So that would be my kind of sad thing to think about this. So
I don't think not budgeting this funding precludes us from pursuing grant money. And if we got grant money and that was the priority, I think there's opportunity for reprioritizing the budget to allow us to pursue those grants. That's more of an opinion, but I think we have that flexibility.
Yeah, that's pragmatic.
And then I'll just mention stormwater. We didn't have any changes in stormwater as a result of the new rate study adoption. So you won't see any changes there. We're moving forward with what was presented in January. And that's all I have.
So you just brought up a question I was going to ask overall, sorry.
No, that's fine.
Which is, you said the word rate study. So ultimately, you know, as we all know, we're going to go through a rate study here for most of the other categories besides stormwater. And help me understand, because I'm ignorant on this. There's a spending cap from the city side, but there's also a rate study that might reshuffle rates and create more revenue. How do those two things work together? If we get to the right point on a rate study where there's some additional funds coming in, does that increase the cap, or is the cap independent? And you know, see what I'm saying? I'm trying to understand how those two things work either against each other or with each other, if you know.
I actually have had the same question, so I don't know that I have an answer to that. Yeah, if
Fair
we
enough.
have additional revenue, does our spending limitation actually increase? I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe that's something we could track down just to get an understanding on how that actually affects the budget. I mean, I would think if you're bringing in more money, you have opportunity to upgrade the system more. So, but that might make too much common sense. We'll have to figure it out.
You also would have to prioritize where it would go too. So that's the second part of that. And I think that's an important thing because we could have that.
Yeah, understood. Ben, do you have any comments, questions?
I always have comments and questions. I think it's been covered. I did ask a question of Kurt before the meeting, which was something along the lines of, boy, if PFAS rules pass and there isn't a magical way to remove PFAS before they go into effect, like there's no magic bullet they develop that's cheap and easy. That probably means we're looking at advanced treatment, and probably PFAS rules will cover wastewater as well as drinking water at some point. And if that were to occur, how would that change our whole trajectory if that were required on both drinking and wastewater and reclaimed, right? Because that's wastewater. So, you know, it might set us on a totally different trajectory for investing in these systems. If that one domino falls. So, that's just a comment to say that I hope staff is keeping a close eye on that one, and also building that into the contingency plans because it could change a lot of stuff. My other comment, which is elaborating a little bit on the cogeneration, that's the sort of thing. So it's cogeneration with local biomass. That's the sort of thing that might not pencil out very well just as a power source, like electrical power source. But if you were doing heat cogeneration and using the waste heat to dry solids, and if you were incinerating the bad part of the solids, and if you factored in other benefits to the community, those things might add up. It's the sort of thing that could really, you may just have to get creative in terms of looking at all the different benefits, because that's the sort of thing that has a lot of positive spin-off benefits. And in not the least of which is that, what if having that capacity cut the cost of forest restoration in half, because we then had someplace local we could take the small diameter stuff, and how much would that save us, kind of a thing, right? So and it might serve to anchor a local logging industry again, if they knew that there was a 24/7 demand for that stuff instead of a kind of flaky demand like currently exists. Something to think about. I'm done.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, we did have a quick email exchange about the PFAS rules and what that may or may not mean, especially, and to the point, it is about drinking water, not so much reclaimed or waste at this point, but obviously it's a closed loop system, so eventually it's going to work its way. But I don't know, Shannon, if you wanted to make a quick comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. I think one thing just to also keep in mind is I feel it changes the position of the utility when the regulation comes in place. So typically when federal regulations come down, the problems that you're describing and the hypothetical situations that we play out, those become realities for multiple really thousands of communities across the nation. So during the regulation, that consideration is given. So when that occurs, that's when the strategies, the technologies, the funding, the things that really paint the path of success for communities like Flagstaff become solidified. So I think, again, just keeping that in awareness. I'm never saying it's bad to be ahead of the curve, but if you're so far ahead of the curve that you fund projects that could potentially be funded along with the other masses that they catch up. So being ahead of the curve on the right things at the right time is the critical balance. It is things that we consider. I know there's great conversations that continue to occur that we stay engaged in. But again, to me right now, the approach is doing the right thing at the right time. So I think Gary did a great presentation of working within the constraints that we set for him to be successful. And as you can see through what he painted a picture of is the immediate needs and investing in our existing infrastructure to make sure we have reclaimed water available and we have biosolids being removed from wastewater. To have those conversations right now in the short-term plan is the focus. It is the priority. And so I think he did a great job of pointing us in that direction. We continue to see how we build that out, and a great couple of things in place along with the rate study and the master plan that really allows us to dig into the details and take hypothetical situations and put those into more solidified plans and paths for the city. I think that is our process. So hopefully that helps a little bit, Chair, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Hey, look, sometimes fast follower is the best plan on stuff like that. You know, you don't have to be the lead sled dog taking all the risk and spending all the money and taking all the lumps on your head. So, yeah, no, appreciate that perspective, Sean.
I'm still here.
How to phrase this?
Run.
Piggybacking on my comment, then Ben's comment, then I'll comment. There's another thing that forest waste products, from thinning might be useful for, and that's biochar. And biochar has been found to be excellent at removing pollutants from water. So another thing that could happen in Flagstaff is to produce biochar. It's a little ways out, but it could be a breakthrough in terms of cheap water purification in the future. We just don't know where it's at. And actually, I'm about to embark on spending a bunch of time researching this area. The thing, I know these future regulations are only for potable water, But if you think about what Aaron is trying to do, which is a good thing, it's taking our reclaimed water and trying to get it back in the aquifer where we can reuse it. I mean, that's a good thing. The thing is, if there are PFAS compounds in that reclaimed water, it does increase the probability we could have a problem with our well water in the future. So that would be my worry about this kind of circular type nature of this problem. You know, right now we've had it pretty good with the Coconino Aquifer. It's a very pure aquifer. And it'd be nice to keep it that way. And the comment from Don about the bottomless pit just a few minutes ago, I mean, this is a different kind of water. This is flood, storm water. But if it gets that bottomless pit, water gets down into the aquifer, I don't know, in a very short time. What's the time, Bill?
Can I maybe follow up on that? Thank you. One of the reasons Coconino Aquifer has been so dependable and hasn't had much in the way of significant water quality problems has to do with the fact that the ratio between the bad stuff that's potentially getting into the aquifer is overwhelmed by the storage capacity of the aquifer. So it's kind of like, you're putting a drop of water into an Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's the contamination rate. So, at some point in time, and there are a lot of studies being done by this, by people a lot smarter than me across the nation, you have to start evaluating the impact of, how high the concentration has to be before it produces some kind of impact on a population, whether it's plants, animals, or people.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so let's close out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And even with the changes, there is a ton of work to do in the next fiscal year. So I know the team's going to be busy. So we look forward to updates on that and the continued dashboards. So thank you so much. Okay, moving to item 5, old business, we have none. And looking at item 6, informational items for the chair. I think this is where we're going to put our discussion around potentially some of the rules revisions, changes around the Forest Service. So Shannon, if you want to.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, thank you. I would like to present, and we do have with us the district ranger for Flagstaff, Mr. Matt McGrath, who would like to present, if it pleases the commission.
Yeah, thank you so much. A topic of great interest.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Councilmember Sweet. Thank you very much for having me here today. It's my first time to come and join you here at the Water Commission. I spent a lot of time standing at this podium or in other rooms here in the City Council, so it's good to meet you all. And appreciate the opportunity to talk about our camping and campfire restrictions. As you said, Mr. Chair, something that folks are very interested in, more and more so every year. And we're proposing some changes to that. So I wanted to come and have the opportunity to talk to you. One, about some of the work that we're doing out on the forest to prevent additional or reduce the possibility of catastrophic fire. And there are a couple of components of that. I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing and then some of the changes that we're going to propose. With your permission, sir, I invite the council or the commissioners to ask questions anytime, interrupt me anytime as I'm working through this, please. I will point out, and I know it's small, but just that map there on the screen, and I'll dig into a little bit more detail there, but just to give you an idea, if you can see the red crosshatch areas around the city, we currently have existing fire restrictions surrounding the city of Flagstaff, Doney, Timberline, Kachina, Mountain Air. So really, we'll be talking about building on some of those restrictions that we have. Our work here on the Coconino National Forest, at least here, particularly on the Flagstaff Ranger District, has always had a very strong component of forest restoration, and that has continued and even accelerated a little bit over the last year after the tunnel and pipeline fires, with an even greater focus on really focusing, I won't say all of our work, but the vast majority of our work on the upper Rio drainage on the west side of the peaks. where we still have plenty of work going down. If you go and drive down I-17, you'll see plenty of work around Munns Park and south of Mountain Air. But really, a lot of the work that I'll be talking about here in the next couple of years is going to be in this upper Rio drainage, with the idea, the goal, objective of preventing a catastrophic fire in that area, because I don't need to tell anybody here what the impacts of post-fire flooding from a fire on the rest of the peaks would look like for the city of Flagstaff and the surrounding area. Doing this work, we have three primary tools. One is mechanical treatment, commercial timber operations. Second is prescribed fire, which usually comes after commercial timber operations or pile burns. We can talk a little bit more about biomass and piles. And then kind of talking a bunch today specifically about people management. And that's something that we work on every day, and that's what I'll be talking about. I went to grad school for recreation management. It turns out it was really just like a sociology degree. It's really trying to manage people's behavior, and now I'm 17 years into my career and I still haven't figured it out. But I continue to try, and this is a little bit of it. I want to go ahead and start by just overviewing some of the mechanical projects that we have coming up. And as I said, this is the northern part of the district, but predominantly focusing on the San Francisco peaks and the west side of the peaks. And so it's kind of can be a small map, but can folks see the cursor here? Okay, so this is Highway 180 going up north, so everybody knows that. And so really focusing on this area here in between Highway 180 and the San Francisco peaks. And there are a couple of timber sales that we will be offering either next week or in the next couple of weeks, called Hawk and Wing Mountain East. Those are about 5,000 acres cumulatively. We've had really great success in the last couple of years of just about everything that we put out or offer. When I say offer, everything we do goes out to bid. So we offer these for sale, folks bid on them. The last round of sales that we did, we had 5 bids on one, 4 on another, and 4 on the third. When I got here, we had plenty of things going. I've been here, this is my 5th season, and we had plenty of things going no bid when I got here in 2019, 2020. So the market and industry has really improved for us over the last several years. So every reason to think that this work will get completed, or they'll be bought. Those two are what we call it doesn't matter, restoration contracts. So it's not a traditional timber sale, which we don't put up any money. Somebody comes, they bid on it, and they pay us for the timber that they remove and generally leave the slash piles. These are a service contract. So in lieu of payment to the government, instead of giving us money, it's basically they give us that money and then we give it back to them. And what we're doing with that is they're removing all of the biomass from these projects. So what we call full fiber removal. So normally on a timber sale, they cut the tree, knock off the branches and the leaves or the needles, and take the trees, take the logs, and leave everything else. And they leave that for us to burn in a couple of years. Well, in these two, all of that will be leaving. Which is a huge thing. We've had the Flagstaff Watershed Protection Project, which was a great success. We left a lot of piles there, most of which we burned this year because of this really incredible winter that we had in December and January. We burned more than 300 piles in the Dry Lake Hills. We won't have to do that here. Those piles are never going to exist. Or they'll exist, they'll get built for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, and then they'll get trucked away. Where they go from there, if you're going to ask, I don't know. I'll also give you, I don't mean to be flip about it, I also don't care. As long as they are not on the National Forest anymore, I'm pretty happy about that. But those two will be offered in the next couple of weeks. Generally, we're trying to have that be a 4-year contract, so they may start working next year, and then they'll have a couple of years to do that work. Also in that area, there's another project called Durfer up here, and Wing Mountain West. Those will be offered next year, and those again are another 5,000 to 6,000 acres. Here's Highway 180 here, going north. This is Durfer, the Hawk Durfer Hills. Hawk and Durfer used to be one, and we split them up. That's why there's a Hawk and a Durfer when it should be Hawk Durfer. And then Wing Mountain West here, just on the other side of 180. Those will both be offered next year. And one of the real benefits of having that, what I call full fiber removal or removing all the biomass, is normally we would go in, we'd have to wait a couple of years for those piles to cure, get just the right amount of snow to burn them, and then maybe a year later we'd go back in with broadcast burning, which is the more traditional prescribed fire. We're skipping that 2 to 3 year window where we have to wait for the piles to cure and we have to wait for the right weather. So instead we'll just have to wait for the right weather for a broadcast burn in that area. So those projects along Highway 180. I will point out another project to you. This one here, this is, where's this? Here's Snowball Road right here. And this is Snowball up here, the ski area. This is called LaRue, and that's after LaRue Spring, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. That project we'd never done any NEPA, National Environmental Policy Analysis of that. It was left out of the 4-Fry NEPA because those are steep, rocky acres that frankly, the Forest Service never thought we would have the money to treat. And so there's no NEPA on that. We're doing a project, starting a NEPA project on those acres right now. We'll be done with that hopefully in about 14 months, and then we will add that to the queue also. So then really almost all of the acres immediately adjacent to the west side of the peaks in the next couple of years will have been commercially treated and then able to follow up with prescribed fire. Also this fall, we have a couple of small hand thins along Snowball Road, a matter of a couple of 100 acres. Those will have some small piles on the side of the road, but we're confident with the amount of snow. When we get up there, there's always enough snow every year. We'll be able to get up there and get those piles. Following up on commercial timber work, then the second tool that we use is prescribed fire. This is a very broad map of the area. Again, our district is oriented north-south and slideshows are east-west, so I cut off the southern part of the district. So apologies to Mormon Mountain for this one. But if you look at this is a lot of the plans that we have for prescribed fire over the next several years, and the ones where you see a circle are ones that we are hoping to get into this spring. I say hoping because every great day we have, like yesterday and today, I know there's some flooding or some ponding, as the county calls it. But delays our spring prescribed fire season another week or so, which is actually a very good thing. But a few that you'll hear potentially us going after this year, the Crater Sinks area, which is that checkerboard down southwest of town, along with the state. So that'd be a partnership with DFFM. Some acres called Mountain Air. It's just south of the airport and Lake Mary Road. And then also Wild Bill, which is on the other side of Highway 180. And so a lot of this is, well, it's all condition dependent. We have a big block down by Mormon Mountain. Occasionally that dries out, depending on, that has a lot more snow, but then it dries out quicker. So really we'll wind up going wherever we have the right conditions, but those three that are circled are kind of our priority. One thing I will mention, I pointed out some acres down by Mormon Mountain. Really we're focusing more now on quality over quantity. So we have like a 5,000 acre prescribed fire block down east of Mormon Mountain. That's less important to me than 150 acres south of the airport and south of town. So that's one thing we'll be focusing on. That will, however, bring more smoke into the community. And so that's kind of, we'll be trying to strike that balance of not smoking out the community in the spring, capitalizing on our spring winds, which can be a blessing and a curse, but using those spring winds to carry the smoke out. But you'll see us attempting to operate a little bit closer to town in the coming years. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about our fire history here on the Coconino National Forest. And you don't need to really worry about the numbers on this slide, but on the left is 1971 and on the right is 2022. And this is a table of our human-caused fires and our lightning-caused fires. And so the blue bars are each year are human-caused fires, and orange are lightning-caused fires. And you'll see I added those trend lines. That's the extent of my Excel skills. But those trend lines, both of them trending pretty significantly down over the last 50 years. And then over the last 15 years kind of plateaued. There's a couple of reasons for that. In terms of the lightning, our monsoon has changed. As anybody know, I've only been here 5 years, but I've talking to people, our monsoon continues to change. We're having less dry lightning starting fires, or when we are having the lightning, we're having rain with it, so the smokes are put out before they turn into anything. And in terms of human-caused fires, I think we have continued over the past 20 years to staff up in terms of our fire prevention program and doing a better job keeping people from starting too many illegal campfires. Last year, there's a lot of variability in everything that we do. Last year was the fewest human-caused fires that we've ever had on the Coconino National Forest. However, 2 of them turned into the tunnel fire and the pipeline fire. So we can have 500 human-caused fires in a year and none of them get over 1/4 of an acre. And we could have 2 fires that turn into 40,000 acres. It really depends on the conditions. This, again, a busy map, but this is basically that black outline is the San Francisco peaks. It's basically Highway 89, Highway 180, and the 418 road north of town. And what this is, the red dots are human-caused fires. This is data going back to 2014, so this is the last 8 years. Red dots are human-caused fires. Orange are illegal campfires, and yellow are abandoned campfires, and I'll explain to you what those mean. A human-caused fire, we call it human-caused fire, a fire that is not in a fire ring or has escaped. It's what you would consider a traditional fire. An illegal campfire is when somebody calls us or we're out in the forest and we find somebody and they have an illegal fire and they are still there to acknowledge their culpability and what they have done. And then yellow, the abandoned campfires are the calls we get on Monday and Tuesday in May and June. When folks were up here camping for the weekend, they went home and they left us a fire smoldering, and then we get a little bit of a breeze on Monday or Tuesday and it blows up. However, it was still in the campfire ring. And so these are just to give you an idea of kind of where our fire hotspots, no pun intended, turn out to be. And then down on the bottom, there's a table that you can't quite see, but we also have measured these by distance to roads. How many fires are started within 300 foot of a road, within 500 feet of a road, or beyond that. And so for the human-caused fires, the one that have gotten away, out of 269 fires, 142, or I don't know what's that, 60%, have started within 300 feet of a road. And then it's up to about 90% that have started within 500 feet of a road. As you know, 500 feet isn't that big. And why we measure that is people drive down a road, but nobody camps on the road. They turn off and there's either a little side road that we don't actually count as like a system road. It's sort of a campground spur or a camping spur, or they go make their own in a meadow. They love to do that down off the 700 road all of the time. This time or in spring is usually when they get stuck out there when they're trying to do that because they don't realize how sopping wet it remains. But most of our fire starts, our human-caused fire starts, are pretty close to a road. You see that's not always true. Some people have hiked up to Humphreys. This is the trail up to Humphreys Peak before you get up to the alpine country where you probably can't start a fire. But people have gone up there. I'm not sure why you'd stop on those switchbacks and start a fire, but people do it. And I don't quite understand why. Similarly, some folks this is folks 3/4 of the way up the up the Weatherford Trail, stopped and started a fire. Not entirely sure why. So it's not exclusively adjacent. Those people were nowhere near their vehicle. They were out hoofing it, and they decided to start a fire. Just a couple of areas I want to highlight for you there. This is the Pump House Wash area. And I'm highlighting 3 specific areas because they're kind of the areas that we have identified in the past as really the priority areas of concern: the Peaks, Pump House Wash, and I'll get over to Walnut Canyon. So this is the freeway coming up here. 17, here's Kachina Village. And then this is Highway 89A going down to Sedona. So this is the 237 corridor, which is one of our more popular camping areas. And we actually have some designated campsites or camping areas in that area. And you'll see a kind of, again, a hot spot. That's where, no doubt, this is one of our more popular camping areas. And so we wind up with a lot of fires, almost all of them there adjacent to the road. In that area, it's kind of hard to get more than 500 feet away from a road, so it's got to be there. But you see really a lot of them are here adjacent to or along the road where there's camping. And then, of course, we get a lot along the highways. We get chain fires all the time. People dragging chains coming up the 17 or up 89, up over, by my office over going over Timberline, Doney Park. Then the final one I'll show you here is down along Lake Mary Road. Here is the airport and one of my offices, and this is Lake Mary Road going down, and then this is the road out to Marshall Lake and some of those camping areas around Marshall Lake. So you can kind of see along where the camping areas are, the popular areas, or along roads is where we generally see our fire starts. Then you wind up in this big block in the middle where we have no roads, and we don't wind up with fire starts there because people generally tend to stay relatively close to their vehicles. So talking a little bit about fire restrictions. I'll start at the bottom here, and I mentioned that at the beginning. We already have a pretty significant sized area surrounding the city of Flagstaff, Doney, Timberline, Fernwood, Kachina and Mountain Air that are closed to campfires year round, even today. If you could start a fire, if you brought your own dry wood out there, you still can't have a fire. It's closed to fires year round. On top of that, we have our fire restrictions, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and that's what you start to hear a lot of talk about in May, June, and into July. I want to just briefly describe that because some folks don't always understand exactly what those are. So no fire restrictions, stage 0, if you will, is a day like today. And then when we wind up starting to dry out generally in mid-May, we occasionally go into stage 1 fire restrictions. And that means that campfires are prohibited all across the national forest. They are still, however, permitted in designated areas. So campgrounds or picnic areas where we have those big metal fire rings and we've done fire clearance around those sites. folks can still use those and have a fire if they like. Then it gets warmer and drier. We move into stage 2, and that is when there are no campfires anywhere on the forest. No campfires out in dispersed areas, no campfires in campgrounds, picnic areas. That's also when the city and the county go into fire restrictions with us, and you can no longer have a fire in your backyard fire pit. That's the kind of what stage 2 looks like. And then also during stage 2 restrictions is when we have restrictions on any of our any activities on the forest that require an internal combustion engine. So from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., the hotter, drier time of the day, we can't use chainsaws, can't use commercial logging equipment. That's when you'll see loggers out there at 3 a.m. so they can get in maybe a half day before they have to knock off at 9 a.m. Even our trail crews, youth crew doing trail clearance, they can't use a chainsaw to cut a tree between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. And then get into stage 3, extreme conditions area or forest closures. In the past, sometimes we've had a full forest closure. The past couple of years, we have pivoted more towards area closures, and those are those 3 areas that I showed you, the Peaks, Pump House Wash, and Walnut Canyon. And that is because those are the priority areas. They're the more sensitive areas to fire. Those are the areas with some sort of elevation or canyon or slope and wind components. And also, it is much easier for us to enforce targeted closures rather than trying to close a 2 million acre forest with 3,000 miles of roads. Many of them don't have gates. So it's basically impossible. When people say, Matt, you should close the forest, it's actually kind of impossible. It's not like the Grand Canyon where you close a gate on both sides and you call it good. Talking about those restrictions, I've said stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. We use our restrictions decisions are science-based. We have a series of criteria that we use to make those decisions, and those are there on the left. A lot of them are really self-explanatory. Maximum temperature, minimum relative humidity. Then we have some composite indices, burning index, spread component, ignition component, kind of self-explanatory. Ignition component, if you flick a cigarette, how likely is it to take off? Spread component, if you get a start, how likely is it to spread and how quickly? And then we get into measuring 1 hour, 10 hour, 100 and 1,000 hour fuels. The difference between those is basically the size of the fuel. If you imagine a 1 hour fuel and a 1,000 hour fuel, 1 hour fuel is like a twig, and a 1,000 hour fuel is a green log that, say, fell over last year. Both of those are spending this winter under like 4 feet of snow in many areas on the forest. But in early May, as soon as it dries out, the sun hits it, that twig's gonna be ready to burn almost immediately. Whereas that soaked waterlogged log, green log, is gonna take, that one will take more than 1,000 hours to burn. So, when we have 1 and 10 hour fuels ready to go, that's one thing. But if we're not gonna get those heavy materials burning, most likely we're gonna catch that fire. And by catch, I mean catch it and suppress it and not have to worry about it. In addition to those science-based indices, we do factor in some professional judgment, available resources. We have a pretty significant wildland fire program here on the forest. If all of my folks are here, we've got a lot of people, and we can deal with almost any situation that comes across. We have 3 hotshot crews here on the forest. That's 75 very well-trained firefighters. Being where we are at the intersection of the freeways, we oftentimes wind up staging visiting resources during the spring fire season. And so a lot of folks wind up staying in Flagstaff waiting for a fire either in Phoenix or over in Albuquerque. So when we have 2 more hotshot crews, then we're up to 125 people who can only do so much physical training running up the side of Mount Eldon and back. And they're here. So if we have a fire start, we've got a lot of people that we can send. So if we have those resources, but then if we wind up having multiple fires on the forest, people are spread thin, we factor that in. Like, okay, we're almost at our capacity. We can't handle anymore. Maybe we go into restrictions. Of course, we also factor in long-term weather, resistance control, which I say is our ability to catch a fire. Almost any fire that's on flat ground, we will be able to catch that fire pretty easily. If there's a 50-mile-an-hour wind, like we saw both times last year, it wouldn't matter. Frankly, it wouldn't matter if I had 6,000 firefighters. There's nothing we can do if there's a 50-mile-an-hour wind like that other than get out of the way and hope nobody gets hurt. And then, of course, a season-ending event. And so when I talk about those, it's like if we're saying July 2nd, and we're in stage 2 and it's like teetering and we're like, it's getting really, really dry and a couple of indices maybe point towards that stage 3 area closure. We call up Brian Klimowski at the Weather Service and he says, and it's like 98% chance we're going to get 4 inches of rain next Tuesday. Well, we may factor that in rather than closing the forest on Friday and then having to reopen it on Monday. That's when I talk about some of those kind of professional judgment pieces that we factor in there. I will say, based on the several years that I've been here, and we've had multiple significant fires in my time here, we generally do not err on the side of trying to risk it and staying open longer or staying out of restrictions longer. Generally, let's go into restrictions and we can deal with the rest. Just to give you a history of our restrictions and the variability that I talked about, and you all probably know the variability of our climate as well as anybody based on your work on the commission. But over the last 22 years, there have been 4 years when we've had no restrictions at all, including my first year here in 2019. I thought that was normal. That was when what we thought was snowmageddon at the time in February. We had like 36 inches of snow in February and then a wet spring. And then we wound up not going into any kind of restrictions at all. Then 21 and 22, we had forest closures, right? And so 2018, we had a forest closure. 2019, we had no restrictions. 21 and 22, we had closures again. It really all depends. But looking at this, stage 1, generally, we start around May 19th and go for about a month into June. Stage 2, generally about June 5th, and then the average end is July 12th. That July 12th is typically lines up with, we say monsoons are usually, July 10th or so, and then it takes us a day or two to do the paperwork to come out of a forest closure or restrictions. So that's when you see that. So normally stage 2, which is kind of that heightened level of restrictions, and you'll see in a second why I'm talking so much about stage 2, is generally, the median's 28 days, but generally averages about 32, 33 days. A year from the first week of June until the middle of July. And then we've had, like I said, we've had that stage 3, which is a forest or area closure 6 times in the last few years. And again, those are variable. Once was 49 days, and then last year was 10 days. But last year we knew the weather was coming, but we had the pipeline fire. Obviously, we already had the tunnel fire. We were dealing with the pipeline fire. It was still hot and dry. We had no available resources, and it's like, okay, let's not take a chance the rest of the week, even though we knew that storm was coming, went into the forest closure. This is our just a graphical representation of our restrictions. At the top is the year 2000, at the bottom is last year. And so where you see a green line is stage 1, where you see a yellow line is stage 2, and a red line is stage 3. So you can see scattered about there are those red lines, which are forest closure years. Then also scattered about, there's no lines next to a year, and that's when we had no closures at all. Those red stars or icons are significant fire starts. So you see they do not always correlate exactly with our fire restrictions. Last year with the tunnel fire, we were nowhere near any type of fire restrictions. We just had a fire start, and it got unusually not even that warm, but dry and windy, and that fire took off. Same with 2018, which was the tinder fire down on the Mogollon Rim. Not always winding up with, and then in 2019 we had the museum fire when we had no restrictions. So it's variable, but just wanted to share that with you. It's kind of an easier way than trying to figure out when we go into it. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. 2019, if you ask the Weather Service, they say this year is lining up very much like 2019. So I will go for that. And I'll take a year of no fire restrictions if I can. So want to look briefly at, and this is sort of the last bit that I have to talk to you about. This is the northern part of the district, and these are our current year-round camping and campfire restrictions. So you see there's a generally crosshatched, and those areas are closed to both camping and campfires. Then there's this one big area here, which is just the vertical lines, and that's actually closed to campfires, but camping is permitted as of right now. Here's Fort Valley, here's the Schultz Y, this is Schultz Pass Road. Going up here, and then of course the water, 420, and then the Waterline Road is up there. And so these areas are year-round, regardless of the weather. And a couple of changes that we're proposing to do here is basically that area where camping is permitted, but campfires are prohibited. Going to add that to the no camping area. And basically that's because people have proven that they can't help themselves. And when I say people, I don't mean everybody, of course. There are elements here of, the 98% of the people who do the right thing get punished for the people who can't. But the pipeline fire point of ignition was here and basically burned up this way. So there is still a lot of country in this Fort Valley area along the 164B that has not burned. We have treated that area. It was part of the Chimney Springs work that was done in 2019 and 2020. But as we saw, Highway 89, a 5-lane highway with clearing on both sides, is not necessarily a fire break when there's a strong wind. So really trying to eliminate any possible human-caused starts. An example of that here is the Friedland Prairie Road, which is really an amazing place to spend a night camping. incredibly popular. It is adjacent to the wilderness boundary, and the peaks just take off right from Freeland Prairie. If we ever have a fire there, start a human-caused fire that gets out of the camp area up into the peaks, it doesn't, you know, that wouldn't, I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but we could have 4 large air tankers sitting here at the airport, and it may not matter if it's the wrong conditions and the wrong wind heading up the peaks. So looking at adding that to the no camping area. And then also there's this area over here, over by the cinders. This is the 776 road out to the OHV area. This is basically a map cleanup. If you look at that, this is closed and this is closed, and we really should have, when we did this a couple years ago, should have drawn that across. I will point out these restrictions have been in place since about the 80s, maybe since earlier than that, I'm not entirely sure, but the person that I've been able to track down who remembers them the longest says we first implemented these around the mid 80s. So this would be the year-round camping campfire closure, and then coming up to the sort of the bigger proposal that we're making here, and again why I kept reinforcing stage 2 restrictions, is that during stage 2 restrictions, we're proposing to make the entirety of the peaks a non-motorized area. And so this is the area that during stage 3 closures, we would close the whole area and we would not let anybody in. And so during stage 2, where conditions are increasingly warm and dry, but not extreme, proposing to close it to motor vehicles. Folks would still be able to hike, bike, ride their horse, take their dog out, do whatever the heck they want, as long as they don't start a fire, and still be able to access their public land. But based on our experience with most fires starting very close to a road, and generally within sight of that person's motor vehicle, reducing the amount of motor vehicles out there during that time, which generally would be about 33 to 35 days, probably 3 out of 4 years based on our history. That's our proposal. Snowball Road, Forest Road 516 would remain open. It's too hard for me to show it really as open on this map. And that's because, well, one, Snowball has an operation up there. People parking up there. I've never started a fire that we have any history of. And also, if you have a fire in the parking lot at Snowball, there's nowhere that it's going to go. So that's not a big concern. And then also that provides access to folks. These are all places that folks would still be able to park and access their public land. Folks would still be able to get up to our most popular summer trailheads, Humphreys Peak and the Kachina Trail up there, as well as parking alongside Snowball Road for the Arizona Trail further down. So all of the trailheads adjacent to on this area, we have a lot of trailheads along 180, along Highway 89 and the 418, which is this road, kind of the northern boundary of this closure. It's really the road that parallels the northern end of the peaks. That road would remain open, and so folks would still have plenty of access points, even including here into the middle. And this whole thing, the Kachina Peaks Wilderness, nobody can drive in anyway. So a big part of the area that we're not going to let folks drive in for that month, they can't ever drive in. So it takes a bite out of it. Also, for the next few years, honestly, we have received funding as part of the emergency disaster recovery to repair Schultz Pass Road, Mount Eldon Lookout Road. The city's going to do a lot of work on the Waterline Road, and the county's going to do a little bit on 420 as they do some of the flood mitigation. But we're getting funding to repair those roads. Probably won't be for 2 years or maybe 3 years. So those roads will generally remain close to the public one way or the other year round for the next couple of years. Folks in here, all the folks in Hart Prairie, just like in the winter when we close our gates due to snow, they have the combo to the gate and they either park and take a snowmobile in, or sometimes people now more and more are moving up from other places and they like to plow the road out to Hart Prairie during the winter, which the longtime residents, I don't know if any of you are from there, don't particularly care for, but folks would still be able to access the private land as always. Even during a stage 3 forest closure, those folks are still allowed to go out to their property. So that would not change very much. Before we, happy to take questions. Before we get to that, I'll just show you the southern part of the district. Again, all that crosshatch is closed to camping and campfires. We're looking at adding this area out here, the very eastern part of the district. This is the 303 road and the entrance to Walnut Canyon. That has become a very popular illegal camping area, long-term camping area. You're limited to 14 days on the National Forest, but folks out there stay a lot longer. And also we've had a lot more fires going out there. Back in 5 or more years ago, that's all pinyon juniper country mostly. Fires in pinyon juniper country used to never matter. Where is it going to go? It's just going to burn itself out. And then in 2021, we had the Slate fire up off 180, and it just tore through for 12, 13 days, and we saw fire behavior that You know, I had only been here a few years, but folks who've been fighting fire here for 30 years had never seen fire behavior in the pinyon juniper country like that. And so really looking at preventing that. And there are also a lot more homes that are out there now these days. And so there's increased risk to our community. So looking at adding that to the year-round closure. And then similarly, those other two areas that I showed you, Pump House Wash and what we refer to as the Walnut Canyon area, which is that Lake Mary corridor south of Walnut Canyon, those will be closed when we do go into stage 2 restrictions, if we go into stage 2 restrictions. Lake Mary Road and all of the lake sites and all the campgrounds, picnic areas would remain open, the day use sites, and then also Marshall Lake would also remain open. This country around here, a fire from Marshall Lake is not going to get into Walnut Canyon, but as you get closer to Walnut Canyon, if a fire starts in Walnut Canyon or drops in and there's any kind of wind, that's going to be a really difficult situation for the community. So doing whatever we can to keep a fire from dropping into Walnut Canyon and then immediately into the city above there. Also over on the south of Kachina, the Pump House Wash area, you know, a fire coming up from Oak Creek Canyon into Pump House Wash is sort of my nightmare situation. But having somebody start something there during increased periods of fire danger, even a human caused one there, if we get the right breeze. You know, we looked at a lot of options, or we kind of tried to brainstorm, like, what are the different things we could try to do here in all of the areas to reduce fire danger. And last year, the common denominator in our two really catastrophic fires was wind. So, you know, we talked to the weather service. We said, what are red flag warnings? How often do we have red flag warnings? Last year was 14 times. Some years it's 0. Generally, it seems like it's 7 or 8. And we thought, is there something we could do to increase or reduce the risk in these areas during those red flag warnings? But red flags, you know, they're forecast a couple days in advance. But the amount of time it takes for us to go and try to close gates and chase people out of these areas. If we lock a gate, we can't lock anybody behind that gate, because if something goes wrong, we have kind of trapped somebody in there. So it takes us quite a while to go in and sweep and try to get people out. And then we would try to reopen it, and then the next week we'd have another red flag warning. It just didn't really make sense. And so like I was talking to folks about this last night, and they said, would any of this have stopped the tunnel fire? And I said, no. We had no restrictions at all. The tunnel fire was illegal because it was in an area that's always closed to fires, and somebody started that fire. So we had restrictions that should have stopped it, but didn't. But like none of this would change an early April high wind event. There's nothing really that we could do to restrict that away. But these area closures, which we believe are for limited amount of time. You know, I've been saying 30 to 35 days a lot. It could be fewer, and some years it could be more if we go into fire restrictions earlier. And sometimes if we don't get the monsoon on July 9th or 10th, and if it takes an extra week or two, that would add. So there's certainly going to be an impact to what we're proposing. I will say I've talked about this a lot in the community, and I don't know if that'll change here tonight, but you know, generally almost unanimous support for this in our community, because we all live here. A lot of our visitors are not from here, and I haven't really had a chance to talk to them about this. So there'll be, I think my voicemail and my email will change a little bit in June. You know, when folks come up or even they just come up anytime and they see Freeland Prairie all of a sudden is closed to camping year round, and they're gonna be like, man, this is my favorite spot. My family's been coming here for 40 years. You know, there's that change, but as our climate has continued to change, as our fire behavior has gotten more and more extreme and less predictable, we feel that these are reasonable measures that we can take to decrease the risk to the community. Certainly not going to solve everything. I'm not calling it a pilot project, but I also don't believe we nailed it the first time. This may not be exactly correct. There may be some things we need to change. I had a chance to come and visit with the city council about this maybe a month or so ago. And, you know, I've been focusing on really specifically the fire piece. I briefly mentioned over on the east side of town, we have a lot of folks who live on the national forest. What we call non-recreational camping. Some people experiencing homelessness, unsheltered, whatever term we want to use to refer to those folks. We have a lot of people who do that. We have somebody who's doing it over on my compound, my office compound across from the mall. And yesterday he had a tent set up. The weather is awful, but there he is because he has no better options. We've got a lot of folks there. The 164B here in Fort Valley, probably our most popular non-recreational camping area. You drive by there anytime during the summer and you see a lot of people that you can tell have not moved in a long time. We do have a 14-day stay limit on the national forest. That is difficult to enforce because it's not really an exaggeration to say we have to see them 14 days in a row. If they go to court and they tell the judge on day 9, I moved, and they just weren't here to see me move, and then I came back on day 10, I know it sounds silly, but that happens every year, and that case will get thrown out. So that is really the reason we're adding this area to the no camping at all. That way, if we see somebody there at all with a tent or an RV overnight, we can cite them and move them. That said, we're not trying to put the squeeze on folks, but they're going to move somewhere else. These people aren't just going to get apartments because we decided to close the 164 Bravo Road to camping, right? If they could do that, they would have done it already. And so they're going to wind up somewhere else. They'll probably wind up over here on the other side of the 180 on the 222 road. So then next year, are we going to say, okay, we sort of shifted the risk from here to here. And does that 2 miles help us? It does. It gives us a little more time for our fire folks to get out to something. It also gives us the highway, which is a bit of a fire break without wind. But this is going to be a work in progress that we're going to have to sort through. I have been working with the community assistance team at Flagstaff, trying to work with them to figure out not only the year-round closure, but when we close these areas entirely to motor vehicle use, there are going to be a lot of people who get chased out. If you remember when we closed the forest a couple of years ago and everybody moved into the Walmart parking lot for like 8 or 9 days until Walmart got sick of it. And then those folks are like, where do I go now? And nobody had any answers for them. So working with the community assistance team to maybe have some answers for those folks and some resources for them when we do move them out. So that's solving the housing insecurity issue is not the goal of this project, but it is a component of it to anything that we do out on the forest. So I just did want to acknowledge that that's something, especially as we shift human behavior, that we'll see how that impacts visitor use trends and where people go. And we may need to make some changes next year. That is, if we go into stage 2 restrictions this year. I'm still holding out hope that maybe we won't have to do that. So with that, I really appreciate all the time. If you have any questions or comments, I'm certainly happy to attempt to answer them.
I got one. How many people working for you?
How many people work for me?
To help you with enforcement, closing thing, clearing out people? I mean, how big is your task force?
During the summer season, I have I'd say about 200 people. 130 of those are fire folks. So if they're busy with fire, they're not available. But an example is our timber program. I've got about 20, 25 people there, and during stage 2 restrictions, there's no timber activity going on. There's still plans that we can do in the office, but generally redirect them and our rec folks. So we usually have about 40 to 50 people that focus on those closures. I will say our permanent, we have a fire prevention workforce. That's 8 people whose job is basically to drive around the forest looking for illegal fires and stuff like that. So they're doing that all the time, and then we supplement that. Basically, it's an all hands on deck when we decide to do something like this. It's because it's an emergency, and we redirect everyone that we have. We bring folks up from Red Rock, Sedona, where it's hot and maybe they want to stay inside or at least not go out in Sedona, and they come up here above the rim and help us out as well.
Cool, thank you.
Sure.
I've got a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
First of all, I fully support changing the way we use the forest around Flagstaff. It's critical. The cost to the city in the stormwater has been huge. And it's no fault of the cities that we're having these fires. So could you go back to that slide where you analyzed human versus lightning caused fire? So my question is, it's a great trend. The number of fires is going down. So my question is, we've had some rather large fires recently, and I would just be guessing because I'm not a fire scientist, but most of them are south-sided and south. They start on south-facing slopes, and the difference between the south and the north-facing slope is immense. I'm guessing you take that into account when you do your stuff. So, but do you analyze the data? And I've talked to your one of the folks you work with in your office, and I've asked this question of several Forest Service people. The fire season in Flagstaff runs anywhere from April, could go through all the way through July some years. I've lived here since '81, so I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen fires burning and left up in that Freeland Prairie camping area 2 times with wind in June. And we called you up and got you up there.
Yeah.
My question is have you analyzed the fire in that window in terms of what is the cause of the human caused fires? Is it somebody throwing a cigarette? Is it somebody starting a campfire and leaving it? Is it somebody lighting toilet paper? Is it whatever the cause is in that window? And versus natural causes during that time. And how does that affect how we set use restrictions during that window? And I'll just say, I'm making my guesses, but I doubt whether mountain bikers, hikers, and equestrians are responsible. Is there a fire we can attribute to that? Or do we have the data to attribute that? Because I think the restrictions can really be structured around the cause of fire and how we use the forest safely. You know, it's kind of managing risk, and I have some other questions, but I'll let you hit that one first.
So in terms of specifically that data analysis that you have described, we have not done that. One of the challenges with the human-caused fire is it's often really difficult to figure out exactly. Tunnel and pipeline, there are big investigations because they turn into something and they destroy property and lives and homes. But normally, you know, we investigate every fire, but a lot of times it's really easy to tell if there's a fire ring and it's in it and it just squirted out. It's easy to see if there's a cigarette butt left behind. When you wind up, is it a vehicle parked in tall grass? That can be kind of easy, you can kind of tell, but sometimes it's hard to tell. So our human, it's really hard for us to get into exactly what human cause is. In terms of the part about have we seen mountain bikers or hikers start fires? Very seldom. I will say in 2019, my first season, we had what I would term a series of suspicious starts out in the Schultz Pass area along trails that felt to everybody with some experience like somebody was trying to do it. But that was a little bit before the museum fire, but we're not able to catch anyone or find someone. But I think it was 3, maybe 4, and it seemed like potentially something flicked on purpose, but it was never proven. And also we got them at 10 square feet or something like that, so it didn't turn into something that anybody ever heard about. So it's it happens occasionally. That they're non-motorized causes, and generally, and it's not the motorized that causes it, but generally the vast majority, over 90% of our fires are started by motor vehicles, which is why this additional level of restrictions kind of targets that resource.
Yeah, and looking at this chart, it seems to me, we've had less fires, but we're having them at times with conditions that make them much larger. So even though we may have fewer starts, man-caused, the results are much more devastating.
I think an example of that is that slate fire I was referring to off of Highway 180 in 2021. It started on Slate Mountain, which is Ponderosa, but then it got across the highway into PJ and just kept going. An example there is one of my fire folks who've been here for 20 years. He called me up at like 5:30 in the morning, and we went out there, and they were saying, "Oh, we'll probably have to burn off of the highway tonight when conditions are better for a burnout, to create a little bit more of a fire break." They said we're going to do that tonight. Then at 11 o'clock that morning, they called me and I said, "Oh, what's the plan for tonight?" They said, "Oh, no, it just shot over the highway." And so from their experience, they thought they had another 12 hours. It wasn't even that windy that day. They thought they had 12 hours, but it just tore through the grass and into the pinyon juniper. So it's really that change in fire, the long-term drought that we have seen and the fire-stressed trees. So I mean, that's a big part of why folks who've been here a lot longer than me are saying fire behavior that they've never seen before.
I actually hiked that trail a month before it burned, and I was looking at the Ponderosa pine condition, and half the Ponderosa pine on the south-facing slopes were dead. So I said, man, this could burn and it happened.
As an aside, I had previously recommended that as one of my favorite hikes because you have great views of Kendrick and the peaks.
So, from the reason I brought this, I tried to get this set up with the Coral Water Commission, is the effect it's having on the stormwater issue in the city. My worry is specifically the drainage of the Rio. So if you took your map and drew a line, we're using a topo map of where that water comes from that feeds the Rio, that is crucial.
Yep.
And the steeper it is, the more crucial it is, right? So that's where the risk is in terms of, you're trying to manage the fire on the spot and, protect life and risk, that's immediate risk. We're worried about the risk as a result of that fire. And, if we can get up there and do management in terms of the forest, that's great, but that's going to take time. And I was looking at your map here and I was trying to figure out, there are certain areas that we haven't treated that are on that steep part of the peaks. And of course, then you have the wilderness, which I'm not sure what the federal government is coming up with regard to that one. But how do we, I'm going to call this the floodscape of Flagstaff. In terms of it burns, we flood. So I think there should be a special thinking around the management of that area. Because of that huge risk, if it burns, then it's going to change the whole character of Flagstaff. It won't be Flagstaff as we know it today. So that's what I'm really worried about. And a lot of the stuff you suggested, no camping, and then at times we just limit entrance entirely. Of course, there's no fires. We've already have an area right now. It's the city managed area on the observation mesa. There's no vehicle entry, no motorized traffic, no fires. It's all limited. And I've noticed that the Forest Service has already eliminated camping south of A1 Mountain, all the way to I think to the interstate. I'm not sure where your closure is, but there used to be tons of people camped out there. So that's a good thing. But I think my thinking is we can minimize the recreational impact on Flagstaff if we determine, hey, it's not, these fires aren't being caused by bikes and hikers and folks like that. So we can allow that activity continue so it's not such a devastating impact on the Flagstaff community and the businesses here, so.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do with that stage 2 non-motorized area, because the alternative would be, stage 2, which is no campfires anywhere. And then the next step in the past would just be full closure. Nobody can go in those areas at all, and which is generally referred to as stage 3, forest area closure. And so that's where we're trying to bridge that gap, because we don't always need to go all the way. And also, there's not, as we said, it happens, but when I'm running over on the Hart Trail on the east side of town, I've never started a fire yet. So I would like to still be able to go in there even during stage 2 and avoid stage 3 closures. So that's what we're trying to get at. I will mention just this west side, this upper Rio drainage. And this is our overall map. It doesn't have the upper Rio drainage line on it, but it is the #1 priority area for the Forest Service, for Coconino County, and also for the city. I mean, as we're wrapping up the Flagstaff Watershed Protection Project, really specifically the acres on Mount Eldon and the Dry Lake Hills and Mormon Mountain, and that is outside, obviously, of the city limits. But as you mentioned, it would have an incredibly impact on the city. So that is our priority area. All of these things, all of these colored areas were part of the first 4 Forest Restoration Initiative, and that did not go as well as people had intended. But it was just last year that these were all released from that previous contract where they were never going to get worked on. And so before they even got released, I had my folks out there. We had to remark the trees because they got marked 8 years ago. You couldn't see the paint anymore. Trees are remarked and redid the layout and the crew's technical forestry stuff for our sales. And that's why they are ready to go now. And those are mostly flat, but then that LaRue project, this one here that we're planning, those are some of those important steep slope acres that you were referring to. And we had no plans to do that or no clearance. That's why we're working on that right now to get that done. And that'll be, as I said, the planning will be probably the next year, and then implementation there. That would be a straight service contract where there is no value to any of that stuff. That would be helicopter logging. We would be paying, we being the collective group, would be paying a lot of money to treat those acres.
So have you thinned that area of Fort Valley right up to Freeland Prairie Road? I mean, it looks like there are some areas you missed, I think.
Here?
Around Chimney Springs, I noticed there's some non-treated areas.
There are. Most of Chimney Springs was completed in 2019. This big block here is either private or is actually is not private. That's the Fort Valley Experimental Forest, and that actually I was talking with the county yesterday about That is not quite to the level of the LaRue priority, but it is the next level because the steep slope acres are wildly important. But if we get a fire starting down in the flats, moving through those trees with the wind, it'll just feed into whatever work we do. So looking at Fort Valley is probably something you'll hear us talking about a lot more in the coming months, and that'll be another planning project. So while we're working through implementation on Hawk, Durfer, Wing East, Wing West, we'll be doing planning on LaRue, and then LaRue will get implemented. While that's happening, we'll be doing planning on Fort Valley, and then that will get implemented. And then sometimes there's the question of why not just offer it all right now? Well, the market's not that great. There's not that much industry. We can only offer, we're total on the district offering 13,000 acres this fiscal year, which is the most we've ever done. And so say we doubled up and did next year's this year and 26,000, they just sit on the shelf because there aren't enough loggers in the Southwest to treat them.
Just so you know, my daughter found a left campfire in that area just east of 180 before the curve into Baderville.
We were finding abandoned campfires during pipeline. During the fire. Yeah.
Took a couple of quick things and we'll see if Ben's got anything. From my standpoint, thank you for this presentation because this is, for many reasons, very important to the Water Services team and Shannon's team. But, thank you for acknowledging the trend of drought versus the need to reflect upon how we use the forests in our clear asset for Flagstaff. One of the things that kind of jumps out at me on your charts is the disconnect between stages and the fires that actually had major impact, which leads me to think that stages may not be the answer. There might be another answer, which I think I saw down in Sedona, which is, do we go back to your sociology degree, which is, do we need to move away from dispersed camping and really focus on developed campgrounds where we can have more control? Because it seems like they did that down the Sedona district just last year, I think.
Yeah, over on the west side, yes.
Yeah, they really went after that, which I thought was very intelligent because now, if somebody's really dispersed, then immediately get them out of there all year round.
Yeah.
It's stay in the developed areas where we have eyes and ears and hoses that can help support this. So it's just a question about whether that's been considered. And then, that's my main thing. So
I will point out on this chart that the fire starts, just going back to 2021, this was the Slate Fire. All those were lightning. Slate Fire, Backbone down on the Red Rock District, Fossil Creek area, and then Raphael. So like those ones were all lightning. That one on Raphael started on the Prescott, worked its way across the Kaibab, and then came up Sycamore Canyon. But then again, I talk about variability a lot. Those were lightning caused. Last year we had very little lightning, and then the 2 human caused fires that blew up. But that's why I put those on there to show folks that, because a lot of times people say, Matt, more restrictions, and both of our human caused fires last year were in areas that are close to fire, year round close to fires, which shows you that restrictions are not necessarily always the answer, and limiting access, which a lot of people get mad at me when I say things like that. Limiting access, oftentimes, we're finding is the answer, and I think, Sarah, that gets to what you were describing, is that closing that area to camping, now then the question gets to the fire, the pipeline fire starting out at the end of the road there. Folks, just because we closed it to camping, then we're chasing people around trying to get them out, and some folks are going to dig in there anyway because they don't really feel they have another choice. So we'll always be dealing with that. But that's something that I think, like I said, looking at this for this year, what can we do right now is the commercial thinning won't happen for a couple of years, prescribed fire won't happen until a year after that, but then trying to manage that human component. So if we got a lightning strike over on that area and it burned, then that's just was the fates. But if we can avoid the human cause, we're better off.
it seems like your mantra really is stop fires, not access. Yeah, which is the right approach. But thank you.
I really have a concern for the homeless issue in this town and where these people can go. So I think there needs to be a conversation with the city. There are lower risk areas in terms of from the city perspective, like north of Flagstaff is a high risk for the city. I mean, we just really don't, anything we can do to, prevent fires up there, we need to do. But there are other areas that are close to the city that might be okay. We know that when southwest winds are the ones that blow these fires usually are the west winds. So there could be other areas that might the city and the Forest Service work together to find a place where people can be. And also change behavior. You don't always have to have a campfire. And it's not smart to have a campfire in the Southwest anymore in a lot of places. And the idea that everybody has to have a campfire needs to change. I haven't had a campfire in years because of that, so.
On your point of, do we need to find a safer, less risky area for people? The answer to that, I personally believe, is yes. The question then becomes, well, one, we can't do that in a matter of weeks. But the question then becomes, and like you said, a lot of folks who live on the forest commute to their jobs, right? And so they're not just going to go an hour away and commute in from the forest. So then that puts them close to town, which means they're close to neighborhoods. And then we get into those neighborhoods are, I won't say will never allow it, because that's not necessarily how it works. But then we run into that issue there, because I've already talked about this. I floated that idea a little bit. And it generally does not go over well. But I do think that that's probably something that we may need to consider in the coming years, because we're not going to find homes for those folks. And so where can they go, which they can still try to live as humans, and we can reduce the threat of fire to the peaks.
Ben, I wanted to just ping you to make sure see if you had any questions or comments. And those okay, but just want to make sure.
I mean, Kurt, I think you heard. Yeah, I think I heard you prompt me for comments, questions.
Yeah, if you've got anything, I just didn't want to. I want to make sure you got a shot if you had anything.
Yeah, I second that. I mean, I think so. There have been a few other communities in the Southwest that have a severe problem with homeless and camping in the public lands around the city that have built organized camping facilities and have had success with that. And it's not that it's plan A, but it could be better than the alternatives for a lot of reasons. So I do encourage y'all to explore that. However, sitting on the Water Commission, that this is just we're just one of the voices, right? One of the reasons to do that. I think it does make sense to look into it. I think Durango has had some success, if I'm not mistaken. So good idea.
Thanks, Ben. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And anytime, if you'd like to have us back, we're easy to track down, either whether it's this or when you're talking about the Waterline Road projects. We have a lot to do with that also. So if you ever want us to come back, we're more than happy to come talk to you about whatever you're interested in.
And I think you can walk out of here feeling like we support what you're doing. So,
great. Well, thank you very much,
you.
Mr. Chair. I appreciate that.
Okay. So, do we have any other items for item 6, which was informational items to from chair? Anybody have any other issues?
Nothing additional from staff. Chair, thank you.
Okay. I would say Shannon and I had an interesting discussion about where was Snowball on reclaimed water, and we turned off their meter last week. Yeah, so probably didn't need much this year. So that's a good thing. All right. Well, we'll move to. Go ahead.
Oh, is there other business you have to do?
We're done.
I'm not sure what the procedure is, but, and I don't know if this is proper, but I would almost like to see the Water Commission vote on supporting the work that is being done for the Forest Service and changing use restrictions. I don't know if we can do that or not, or.
I don't think we're allowed to because it wasn't an official agenda item, so we can't take a vote or move on that. What we can do is draft a letter supporting that and circulate that to everybody that wants to sign it and send it to the Forest Service. I think we're okay with that, but yeah. My parliamentarians over here said yes. So, okay. All right, with that, we will adjourn the meeting, and thank you all. And again, thank you to the entire team and the Forest Service again for all your hard work and for the information. Really, really enlightening. And we will adjourn at 5:55. Thanks, everybody.